The following is a presentation of the ForceCenter podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is the ForceCenter podcast feed, and this particular episode is Cues of the Force. I've said every Q word I know. It is not any of those. It is not quotidian or Quiznos. It is questions of the Force. We are very excited to take your questions and see if we can find some A's. I am Joseph Scrimshaw.
I'm Ken Napzok. What if this was Q of the Force and we were putting the theory out there that Q from James Bond was actually a Jedi?
And also Q from the Q Continuum in Star Trek.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All the Qs at once. I'm sure there's some fan fiction of all different kinds. Anyway, today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Our first A. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. While I was talking, there was even more titles added. That's how many there are. We are recommending The Princess and the Scoundrel by Beth Revis, partially because it's one of my favorite Star Wars books. I know Ken loved it as well. And it also it features the Galactic Star Cruiser, which we'll be wrapping up. We got some great thoughts about somebody who got to experience that we're going to read later. So it seems like a good time to celebrate that part of the Star Wars galaxy and this book. If you want to check out The Princess and the Scoundrel, you can download your free audiobook today by going to audibletrial.com/ForceCenter. One more time, that's audibletrial.com/ForceCenter for a free audiobook. 1A down, several A's to go. Ken, do you want to talk about our asks?
That's right. Our asks are as follows. We are really excited. The increased support over on patreon.com/ForceCenter. We love it and we feel it and we feel your support. We have a new goal over there that we're very close to getting to at $2,200 a month. We're going to do another Star Wars ranked live stream exclusive for patrons on Patreon and then release it later to the public like we did with the sequel trilogy scenes episode. But it's a lot of fun to broadcast directly to our audience on Patreon. So consider supporting over there. Also let you know, one of the other things you all made possible is the new revamped YouTube edition of Jedi Beat, and it will premiere Monday, July 17th. Run for a total of 5 weeks. Jennifer, even though she's been taking so much deserved time off from the show, is still working. She's getting those emails out to us of just, I'm so excited. It's so much fun. So we're excited for you to revisit those episodes and see it again for the first time, all because of your support at patreon.com/ForceCenter.
That was a great read of an ask. Clear, concise, emotional. It was great. Perfect. Let's see if we can get our A's and answers anywhere near as good as that ask reading. We're going to go into our questions now. We have 2 from patrons on Patreon. We have 1 from Twitter, and we have a Power of the Light Side segment. We're going to go first to patron Jackson Gavin. Here's what Jackson has to say. On a recent episode, Joseph, you mentioned following certain Star Wars actors and their careers. I had recently sat down to watch a film called Whitnell and I, a dark comedy from the 80s starring Richard E. Grant. He was incredible, but another actor caught me by surprise, Ralph Brown, who played Rick Ollier. He was hilarious in his small role in the film and showed incredible range from his Captain Obvious role in The Phantom Menace. I would love more Rick Ollier, by the way. Strongly agreed. Jackson continues, this preamble leads me to 2 things. Have any Star Wars actors caught you by surprise in another project? And when the heck are they going to bring Naboo back? This is 2 great questions for the space of one. Ken, have you ever seen Whitnell and I?
I have not. I've seen the Spice Girls movie featuring Richard E. Grant. In fact, I own a copy of it because I love it. I've not seen Whitnell.
Yeah, I might be saying that incorrectly because it is literally at the top of my Max, HBO Max, just Max. Not a fan of that rebranding. It's easy to forget. Like, hey, HBO, Warner Brothers. I remember those. What is this one called? Steve? It's on my Steve queue. Anyway, huge fan of Richard E. Grant. And then the other main actor in that is Paul McGann, who Doctor Who fans will know as the Eighth Doctor. So I am incredibly excited. It's been one of those movies that like sometimes my wife is away and I'm like, what am I going to watch tonight? And I waste about 2 hours trying to decide. And this one's always in the mix. So I'll be bumping that back up and able to check that out for the sweet Ralph Brown content.
Yes.
But going to the first part of Jackson's question about finding Star Wars actors in other places that you didn't know they were, what are some of your favorite moments of being surprised by Star Wars actors?
Yeah, and I'm trying to separate this from, and some of it matters of being young and not realizing actors have careers and they appear in other things, and that's part of it. Some of the stories I've discussed before, but it's funny, like you mentioned Ralph Brown. I in 1999 was like the Wayne's World 2. Like, yes, Brown M&M's. Like, I was just thrilled that Ralph Brown was in Star Wars. So that's the other way around him. And then recently, I don't know if you have any recent stuff. I think it's different. We're much more aware. We've been covering movie news, or we're in the business, and it's like, yeah, not only do you understand it, but it's still fun. I always laugh when, in a great, way when Game of Thrones people show up as officers in Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. Same casting offices, all that kind of thing. But so trying to remove a little bit of that here, I came up with 4 examples. I'll start with one I've definitely talked about before. This is definitely oh my gosh, there's actors in Star Wars and they do other things. Well, I guess I could start with Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, but Ian McKellen in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, he's the butler. Arthur has that great welcome to hell line, very much like Palpatine. That movie came out in 1988, directed by Frank Oz. It is a remake of an old movie. I'm a big Steve Martin fan. So love that movie. And it just blew my mind. And then, I didn't sync it up right away. I wasn't like, oh, Emperor guy, but I was like, that seems familiar. Then the name, and, I'm like 12, 11, IMDb doesn't exist. And so then wait, Ian McDiarmid. That's the Emperor name. Like, oh my God. And over the years, that's a movie I watch about once a year. I just it's a small role, but he chews up the scenery wonderfully when he does appear. And I love that role. And you recently watched that movie, right?
Yeah, no, it has been on my list. It's one of those movies where I feel like I know a handful of bits of it from, frankly, not getting to go to the movie theater a lot, but obsessively watching commercials.
Yes.
So anything used in the commercial for that film is seared in my soul, but I'd never seen the whole thing. And I actually watched it on the flight to Celebration, and it was great. I'm a big Steve Martin fan as well. The film was a little different than what I thought it was a little bit more of a raunchy, naughty comedy. I think it probably was for the time, and I probably heard people talk about it that way.
Right.
But in modern parlance, not too racy. I thought it was hilarious, and I loved Ian McDiarmid's role, the Welcome to Hell in particular.
Yeah. No, love that. So there's that, and then so there's one that happened yesterday. That I went down. I mentioned to you off air, and I think we even in the news episode, watching my obsession right now with the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, which is the re-edited version of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. So there is oodles of, oh my gosh, that Star Wars person's in it. And a lot of them I knew, and there's still some surprises, like Bruce Boa, General Riekan is in the episode. He's an ambassador, the episode Austria. And I had one of those like, wait a second kind of moments. And that's not a name, it's a name. Bruce Boa is a name we're familiar with the Star Wars fans, but I don't even know his resume. Like I haven't taken the time to look at his long career, I'm sure. So that was kind of fun that even, in the 90s, Lucas is like, hey, I like General Riekan. Let's get him in here. It was kind of fun.
Yeah. I understand Kirshner had a good time with him. Bring him on in. Yeah. So those are your first two?
Those are my first two, and the final two are two big ones. So I got Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill. So I am a huge fan of the movie When Harry Met Sally. Love it. I love it for a lot of reasons. I love it also from the screenwriting aspect. When I was studying screenwriting in the 90s, one of my favorite movies to kind of dive into, and just a fan of it. I love it a lot. I've seen it well over 60 times in my life. Love it. And Carrie Fisher and Bruno Kirby are kind of the co-stars with Billy Crystal, Meg Ryan in that. And I was, by the time the movie comes out and I'm watching it and owned it on VHS and everything, burned the copy, burned the tape away, watching it over and over. Obviously I knew, Carrie Fisher for many, many things, beyond, knew she wasn't just Princess Leia, though pop culture would only remember that. So, but I love her performance in that movie. And I just love how she plays it. And I love everything about it. And in a movie that has so many memorable scenes that are pop culture, and I'll have what she's having, all that stuff. And you got a powerhouse like Billy Crystal. You got Meg Ryan, arguably in that height of her stardom kind of period of time. You have a lot of wonderful, powerful, emotional moments coming from Carrie Fisher, opposite Bruno Kirby, and love some of it. Love it. I will never want that wagon wheel coffee table is one of my favorite lines. And it's just so Carrie. And for someone who would, I think got to show some of her chops, this is a, well-trained actor, was going to drama school in London at the time, New Hope, everything. I think she shows her chops in Star Wars, but it's Star Wars, as we know, it's played a little differently, especially there. But I think she's got some great moments. But this is one of those moments she goes on to be known as a writer, in a weird way, like a comedic theater performance with her one woman shows and everything. Mm-hmm. But this is a movie reminder to me, just like as an actor, she absolutely had it and absolutely brought it. And it's one of my favorites, and love it. Revisit it time and time again.
Yeah. Oh, I think I maybe saw that movie when I was an extremely young man, and it's definitely one that I need to rewatch. So I'm not going to wait for a flight to Star Wars Celebration. Make that one a priority.
Love it. And then my final one, I said Mark Hamill. This is one to Jackson's question of it caught you by surprise in another project. This is kind of literally. I'm going to Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back. I am a fan of the Jay and Silent Bob movies. The last one, the reboot one, made me bawl. I love that film. I think Kevin Smith's got a great heart to his stuff. But Mark Hamill showing up as a cockknocker at Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back. Man, talk about different time. Internet is alive and well, but it's still different. I think that is the great line of "what the bleep is the internet" line is one of my favorite lines from Jay to Ben Affleck in there. Love it. But when he shows up, and by the way, Carrie Fisher has appearance too. When Mark Hamill shows up and they actually do the freeze frame and, hey kids, look, it's Mark Hamill. It was a surprise. And it was a surprise because, again, you and I have talked about Mark Hamill has a wonderful career. I was even watching an interview today on CNN, like reminded me that he really wanted to be Mozart in the movie Amadeus, and Milos Forman wouldn't let him because he was Luke Skywalker. And this is a guy who has a whole career, and the voice acting thing is well known. But I'm telling you, kids, it wasn't as well known if you weren't watching those shows, which I wasn't. I didn't watch a lot of the Batman stuff, right? I didn't know he had that career. I just thought he was I don't know, Where Are They Now? Entertainment Tonight artist, right? I didn't know. And so by the 90s, mid 90s, I know he's got some other things. I had heard he was doing the voice. I had friends who were big fans of those animated series, but I still didn't know. And then boom, he shows up and I just had so much joy. It was like, God damn it, Luke Skywalker's on my screen. It's crazy. And I love that performance. And it just shows he's when he wants it, he's over the top. He's a fan of comedy. He loves to play and brings a certain energy and charisma and presence. And so I love that. Mark Hamill and Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back.
Oh, you're making me think of Mark Hamill in the late 80s, early 90s on the, I think it was maybe 90, actually, the Flash television show, playing the Trickster. That was amazing. That was extremely early superhero television attempt. Mm-hmm. And it ended up coming back and playing the character in the new Flash series. That new series that ran for 9 years and just ended. The new one.
The new one.
That's great. Those are great. There's so many ways to approach this question because there's so many different times in life. I discovered for myself an appreciation for Scream on DVD, renting it before I even had a DVD player, or not before I had a DVD player. Before actually I did. I rented it on VHS, and then when I bought my first DVD player, the Scream box set is one of the first things I bought. Anyway, Carrie Fisher was a delightful surprise in Scream 3. Didn't know she was coming there, and it's a very Carrie Fisher role as well. Yeah. Enjoy that one very much. Very funny. Very Carrie Fisher. For recent things, I'm just always on Oliver Ford Davies' watch.
Yeah.
As I love C.O. Bibble, and he pops up lots of places. One of the first things that I was going to talk about, as well as all the prequel stars in Young Indiana Jones. Oliver Ford Davies pops up right away. Pernilla August, and one of the great joys of watching that show is seeing Lucas meet the actors he will then cast in the prequels. So that one's a high up one for me. I'm a big fan of the movie from 2018, Christopher Robin. I don't listen to any sort of like really intense, hardcore Winnie the Pooh podcasts, but my understanding is that people were a little meh on Pooh, on this version of Pooh. But I love that film. It's so beautiful and gentle. The basic conceit is Christopher Robin's an adult and he's so stressed and he's lost any connection to the magic and the joy, and Pooh brings it back. A story I need to hear often. But I partially went to it because like I liked the trailer and it made me laugh, and it's like, okay, Obi-Wan Kenobi is married to Agent Carter and the 12th Doctor plays a bunny. I'm going to go see this. And then everybody knows this. I just forgot that, that Pooh and Hondo are one and the same, Jim Cummings. Right. So then I was like, oh yeah, this is Hondo coming back into Obi-Wan's life. And then Oliver Ford Davies was there, and Amanda Lawrence, who plays Larma Dassey. So that thing's just loaded with Star Wars from all different eras and perspectives.
I love that. And I put the spirit of this question is, even you spent all these years watching the movies and you understand actors in the industry and jobs, you still get excited because they're Star Wars.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing for me, my last two that I'll list is it's not surprise. It's more of like an ongoing joyful hunt, that it makes perfect sense because of the way and where the original trilogy was filmed in the UK. That there's going to be crossover with my beloved classic Doctor Who, but also with James Bond. And a couple of my favorites. I've seen all the James Bond films many times, but my wife and I did a full rewatch. We got to Octopussy from 1983, and it's loaded with Star Wars actors in different contexts. Jeremy Bulloch is a limo driver named Smithers. You're like, oh, cool, that good for him. But then Bruce Boa, Rican, as you said, is in there, and he's palling around with Richard La Parmentier, Admiral Mahdi, and then General Madine, Dermot Crowley shows up as well. Octopussy, It makes sense because it's 1983. It's when all these actors were working. But, you're all caught up in the tension of like, oh, no, James Bond needs to dress up like a clown to stop nuclear war. And he's got to convince Rican and Mahdi that there's a problem,
That's amazing.
Yeah, wow. It's bang for your buck. Hey, that's a Star Wars actor. Octopussy's the place to go for me.
That's great.
Yeah. And sometimes it's for classic Doctor Who, particularly if I'm watching something from the 60s or the really early 70s, it'll be like, wait, could that possibly be this very minor character from the original trilogy? And my favorite of that is there's a classic Doctor Who serial. It's the Second Doctor era. And it had only been discovered in like the late 90s. It was thought lost. It's called The Tomb of the Cybermen. And one of the joys of watching classic Doctor Who that was, made in a completely different time is, with all these workaday actors, the shows were shot incredibly fast. It was science fiction, but they were basically shot like live plays. You're on a soundstage and got cameras pointed at it and go, and you play the whole scene. So that's the environment that these actors are in. And when they attempt American accents, it's always a fun challenge. So there's this character in Tomb of the Cybermen played called Commander Hopper, who's just got a lot of big American, like, I'm going back to my rocket. Like, it's really funny. That part of it was the bravado and the obsession with his rocket was very accurately American. But I've watched that one dozens and dozens of times. But the last time I watched it with my wife, I was like, wait, that face, that squint. It is the actor, I don't know how to say his last name, George Rubeck, who plays Prodigy, or second officer in the credits from A New Hope. He's the no transmissions were sent guy on Tanta V4.
That's awesome.
And it's not even his voice. He was overdubbed. So it's just like, I just recognize his squint.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's a fun one. To have all three of these worlds that I so like, Doctor Who, James Bond, and Star Wars, interconnected, and find some fun surprises there.
Love it. These casting offices, you get these wonderful Rolodexes to draw from. Yeah,
and just such a different era. I was just like, well, I just I can go down and I get a list, and maybe I go over here and do this. And, let's talk about the other great part of Jackson's question of when are they going to bring Naboo back? This is one of my deepest desires for returning environments. Where are you at with your Naboo desires?
My Naboo desires, yes.
Yes, the perfume that Jar Jar sells. Do you have visions of? Do you want it to come back? Do you have visions of when, where, how?
I'll be honest. I don't have any specific when, where, how. But my Naboo desires are high. Much like the desires for Coruscant were very high, especially after Rogue One, and you got a glimpse of it, right? We were all like, "Oh, you looked out the window." I think we a lot of us Star Wars fans, we wanted to see it. We wanted to see an animation. We started to spend some time there, season 7 Clone Wars and everything. But to go back in a major way, Andor, Mandalorian season 3, and other spots, like it was fulfilling. I still love it. And I still love just imagining life on that planet. I think of the many reasons I love Dexter's Diner, the fact that, that's where I would be if I lived there. If anyone knows me, I love my diners. So became obsessed with it. And then it's happened a few times. I still want more Coruscant. But I think, my heart has turned towards Naboo. It's a little bit of the prequel love vibe of just seeing it exist. I think it's you could go shoot there if you want to make it practical and go to Lake Como again and just get some beautiful, beautiful shots if you want. So I think I'm ready. And there's a lot to the planet with it being, Padme, Palpatine, Gungans, a lot going on there. And I think some of the times they return to it in the Clone Wars were very fulfilling as well. So I would love it. To me, it doesn't, even Ahsoka was there for Padme's funeral, as we know now, which was a bit of a return to it, I guess you could say. It's to me not as key to her story as other characters, right? But with Natalie Portman saying, "Hey, they asked, I might come back." I mean, there's ways to do it. I think a second season of Kenobi, some sort of flashback, some sort of, not that he needs to return, but maybe there's other characters to go. I don't know. I would love to see it and feel it. Post the fall of the Empire, and then post fall of the Republic, and then again post fall of the Empire in a major way. And I want to point out too, video games, the Battlefront 2 story, we go there for the Battle of Naboo, Chuck Wendig's Aftermath, the epilogue of Jar Jar Binks takes place there. All that we've been there, but to the spirit of the question, in a major way.
Yeah, we have not been there in live action.
Yeah.
And I love that Ahsoka scene. I love that reveal. I love the conversation with Bail. So that's some quality Naboo content, but it is also at like an event that we know. So I think that makes it a little bit different for me too. Yeah. I for me, there is just the hey, I love that. And I'd love to see Naboo again. Just like I'd at this point love to see Bespin again, because we haven't, it hasn't been overexposed in live action or even animation. So there's I just love those environments. But Naboo seems like it has such vital storytelling, like you're saying, because of Padme, but also because of Palpatine. One of the Lego shows goes into, there's a museum about how great it is that the Emperor comes from here. But so the special focus that Naboo would have during the reign of the Empire, where it is a planet that would normally lean toward opposing the Empire, but needs to kind of be a little jewel of the galaxy to celebrate the homeworld of our beloved Emperor Palpatine, that there's such great opportunity for tension there.
Yeah.
That I'd love to see that. And then to get a sense of what was Naboo like during as the alliance began to form and as things ratcheted up? What was it like? And now that there's a chance to rebuild after the fall of the Empire, what is it like? Because it's not just a planet we visited. It's a culture that had a set of beliefs that Padme upheld and represented, and seeing the Arts District and seeing the way their politics were structured and all these great things. Anyway, some candidates for me is if it works narratively, Bad Batch season 3 would be great, because I think one of the things that Bad Batch has done so well is kind of a tour of the galaxy as the Empire's fist closes.
It's a great spot.
Yeah, they did such a great job of upping the tension of those horrible episodes where the unspeakable thing happened towards the end of season 2, by going to Tarkin's homeworld and feeling like we are putting our head in the lion's mouth. That I wonder if you could get that too by going to Palpatine's homeworld. The place that I think it's most likely is. This is a daring prediction that others have made, so I'll be daring with friends. Mandalorian season 4 Grogu flashback. I do think there's a good chance that Grogu gets taken to Naboo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would love that. Final one is Heir to the Empire would be pretty fascinating to see how Naboo is functioning within the new government and how do they react to this giant new threat.
Yeah, it'd be a good spot. God, I gotta admit, I think I totally forgot about Mando season 4, because my hopes that Grogu ends up in the arms of Jar Jar are out of control. I don't talk about it a lot, but that's a big one I want.
Yeah, you're not alone. I think let's just do it. Let's just let Ahmed Best have a conversation with himself.
That'd be amazing.
Let's have Jar Jar lash his tongue out and Grogu catch it with the Force. Come on, why not try to eat his tongue? I want to see Grogu try to eat Jar Jar's tongue and then have to be told no. Yeah. All right, great question, Jackson. Thank you so much. We're gonna move on to a question from Anakin Crespin. Hello, Anakin. Anakin says, "Hello, friends. The look and technology of the Old Republic era in Legends was very similar to that of the prequels and beyond, probably even too similar if you think about it. But in canon, the High Republic has already established many changes in the mere 200 or 300 years before The Phantom Menace. Because of this, I was already pretty curious about how the technology in the Old Republic was going to look going forward, but instead we'll first be going back even further to the dawn of the Jedi, 25,000 years before the current era. That originally had me thinking that perhaps there wouldn't even be space travel yet at that time, or at least travel by hyperspace. But James Mangold has said that despite being set so far in the past, the film will not be pre-tech and not to expect a Stone Age version of a Star Wars movie. So, says Anakin, that said, though we are many years out from this film getting made, what do you think space travel and technology could be like during the time of The First Jedi? Do you think people can already travel through hyperspace, or do you think that hyperspace capabilities weren't developed until later after Jedi were the first to access hyperspace with the Force, like Vernestra Rowe or Marie Santeca, as speculated in the High Republic books? Do you think the technology of the time will allow for stuff like a galactic central government? Will we see lightsabers by the end of the film? Anyway, I'm not taking any of this too seriously or anything. It's just for fun. Smiley face. So good luck with the speculation, and may the Force be with you. Thank you very much, Anakin, for the very fun question. I think we've got so much Star Wars news coming out of Celebration. If Dawn of the Jedi was the only film they announced, this would be an even bigger point of discussion, because it's a great one to think about. Ken, where do you go with this?
I go. I think it's an important enough question as we get closer to that movie, which we're not close to that movie yet, I don't think, but I do think it matters, and I sometimes see matters in the way where, like, I sometimes see those critiques of the differences between the technology in the prequels and not sequels, but original trilogy, but also the similarities and silly debates of why did the Naboo ships, the Nubian ships look so beautiful and elegant, but then the X-Wings and everything seem kind of beat up, and that's been explained many times over in terms of real world stuff. But there's a balance to me where I do want to have it in this Dawn of the Jedi film. I do want it to feel different. It would make sense that it's dramatically different, but I don't like to spend a lot of time there. And I don't want to, we got enough to build with the Jedi Order and the Force to spend too much time with, well, how are we going to get there? Is not necessarily something that I enjoy. It's not that I don't want these questions answered, because I love the High Republic stuff of, the Mars Hanteca stuff. And we know how to get around, but we're figuring it out. And also who owns these lanes, all that kind of stuff. I think there's some important storytelling. The example I go to, and it's just like, if you're sitting and you're developing these movies, and not to put the creativity into those boardrooms, but like, I think it's fun to design whatever, to have the lightsaber attached to the power cord, like the Legend stuff, the first early lightsaber things, which reminds me of the early, cameras that used to carry a VCR around, strapped here back when I was, in video production in high school. I do go to like the Game of Thrones world experience. This was going to be a thing where, House of the Dragon comes out. It's 150 years or so before the series that everyone's familiar with. And it's pretty much the same. Right. And I've seen people tweet about that, why they don't like it. And it doesn't seem realistic that 150 years, there's not there should be more dramatic differences, which again, I understand that's realistic. I'm not there for that. But the series that was going to go first, which they did the pilot that no one's ever going to see, the Blood Moon, which was the Jane Goldman led series, starring Naomi Watts, was thousands of years before. And in the description of the show, there was just the way that the world is set up, and hey, here's what's coming. It wasn't even that the names you're familiar with might not yet be there with some of the houses that fans love, the castles, the fortresses. I mean, you're looking at, straw huts versus castles, and what that might look for. And would it be hard for people to connect if they just want to pass through and watch dragons burn things? This might not be for you. Also, there weren't dragons, and it was not why the show didn't go. There was other reasons for this. Again, this pilot we'll never see. Probably books could be written on it, but that was one of the concerns. It's like, we got to be careful what we're getting here. The wall might be the only thing we know that people are familiar with in that world, and it's not going to look like the world that they tune into. That could be something that I would be not worried about, but there's a balance to find in it. So would it be great to see a Jedi go, all right, hey, I'm going to try this thing called a lightsaber. Sure. But if you spend too much time on it, it might not feel like the world. But again, this might be a moot point to a lot of folks who are like, no, give me that. Or nah, I don't really care. Just give me the story. Obviously, I'm here for the story. But I do think you have to think about it a little bit when you're putting together Star Wars stories.
No, I really agree of being aware of what are the elements that make this feel like the thing that it is. And obviously we always want the new in Star Wars, but how much can we strip back and still make it feel like it is the same galaxy, but just in an earlier time, is kind of a fun balance to figure out. I think your Game of Thrones examples are great. A couple places that my mind goes is the way that Mangold has described this is this religious epic. I think that there's a possibility, speaking of new, that it covers more time than we're used to a single Star Wars movie covering. The amount of time that a Star Wars movie covers is already up for a great debate of how long was Luke on Dagobah compared to how long were they in the Exegorth's belly, all that stuff. But for a religious epic, it might span a good chunk of time all by itself. I mean, things like Spartacus chart years and years and years of the characters' lives. Right. In Mangold, it's hard to look up some of his interviews because you try to Google James Mangold and Dawn of the Jedi, and it's hard to get to actually his interviews without a bunch of explainer videos that may or may not be entirely accurate. Not Star Wars Explained, always accurate. Star Wars Explained. But anyway, he has said that it's the discovery of the Force and the creation of the Jedi, which to me, that suggests a longer story. That suggests we have a name for this thing that many civilizations and cultures have felt, but now people are actively using it. And now, if that's all true, then who should we be?
Right.
It seems almost like connected beats, but separate beats, the discovery of the Force and the creation of the Jedi. So I think that we might even see technology evolve within the film itself if it covers a wide enough span of time.
I love that. I love that take. I love that thought. It'd be great.
Yeah. So I'm really curious about that. I'm also, I think that there's a lot of great storytelling opportunities. I think it was such a great move for the High Republic to say, yeah, hyperspace exists and it has a long time, but we're kind of in this era of expansion where a bunch of lanes have been discovered. So people know that planet exists way out there, and you could always go to it, but it took a real long time. Now you can get there even faster. You can get there in time for the fruit from this one planet to not spoil.
Right.
And they made that a part of their storytelling of how does that change affect the galaxy? And it's in the first phase of High Republic, to me, it's so baked into the story and the philosophy that Lena So, the Chancellor, is able to say, well, now we can all be connected. We can all be together. We can easily come from place to place and share foods, share cultures, share perspectives. We can be in this together. And that's because the technology is creating it. So I'm very curious to see how much the technology is not just sort of like fun window dressing or flavor, but how much is it motivating the story if, people from more core worlds are connecting with these ancient beliefs and formalizing it into this thing that they are calling the Force and deciding that it's the Jedi. So I like the idea that hyperspace travel is there in some rudimentary form, but it's very, very slow and it's very dangerous. I think my mind really goes to just like some real life stuff where, our world was from the perspective, particularly of European teaching, was being explored. And it wasn't like you could just, if you lived in Germany, you could hop on over, but these quote unquote discoveries were affecting huge things. I've talked a couple times about working at Mill City Museum in Minneapolis, which told many stories, but one of them was there's a waterfall in the Mississippi River. It is currently called St. Anthony Falls because it was first seen by a priest, Anthony, and he and other explorers reported back to Europe that there was this massive waterfall. So it was known of, again, I want to say this gently, because of course the people who lived there, they knew it, they had a relationship with it. But from the perspective of people who saw it as a power source.
Are you talking about our waterfall?
Yeah. People knew about it for hundreds of years of, hey, when we finally get over there and take that. And even in the early settling of, again, I'm using all this the language that I was taught that is loaded. But when the person who eventually legally successfully claimed St. Anthony Falls was this guy named Franklin Steele, kind of known as the father of Minneapolis. I played him and told his story in the museum. I had to put on an old timey suit, and it was a weird and wonderful time of my life. But anyway, that was always a fascinating story because this was 1838 that he made the claim, and he was born in America. And from a wealthy family, and there was kind of a little conversation on the East Coast of like, well, which of our sons should we send out to claim that waterfall the second we can from the government? Wow. So sorry for the long story about the founding of Minneapolis, but the point is, to me, there's interesting stories in that. If there is like sections of the galaxy who are like, we've never been there, but some guy told us 800 years ago that there's this planet where you can get these powers.
Yeah. So yeah. And there's way to it. And you were touching upon it too, of just like, we know we can get there, but it's a risk to get there. Adds a lot of value to the stories. This is totally maybe a weird connection, but I love doing that kind of stuff. This weekend, catching up on non-stores reading David Hepworth's book on 1971, The Year in Music, which had spawned the Apple doc I was talking about too. talking about going to, quote, make it in America, right? This is 1971. Artists like Bowie knows people. It still wasn't easy to get to him. Like literally wasn't easy to get to America.
Yeah.
Access to flights, even some of the first flights, that made it affordable, quote unquote, were in like 1970. So the story of the old, the UK rocker with a dream to go make it in America had added weight of, I know I can get there. People have been there. The Beatles went there and they told us about it. The Stones are there. It still was, it was a thing. That's why going to, quote, make it American in terms of, pop culture and music and everything had the mythos was larger than the journey almost. And if you could just do that in Star Wars of like, we need to get there, what you're describing, hey, there's a planet with these things on it. We can't just hop on a ship. We can, but the fruit might rot, but also it's perilous in a lot of ways, not just perilous journey. And they're going to find space whales and pirates and all that kind of stuff, but just like it is a thing to do it. Capital.
Yeah. T. So I'd like the idea of like, I'm not saying this is going to be the story or that, but if this is set on Octo, at least partially, and there are rumors that there are these the people with abilities, and your kid has a weird ability, and there's some parent who's like, well, my kid's 4. I'll get on this sketchy flight, and we'll get there when the kid's 8. That's fascinating. And to Anakin's question about like central government, I think there's going to be a lot of well, I shouldn't say I think there's going to be. I would be fascinated that if there's a lot of like there are big empires or coalitions, but not a central government, like just big territories fighting to lay claim to the galaxy. To me, it makes sense that the Jedi rise. And I think Mangold has said something about this, a difficult time, that maybe a lot of these kind of old powers that are not centralized are at war. There's greed, terror, raids, a reason for the Jedi to rise, to give hope to a war-torn galaxy of if it is like, I got to make the trek to this planet, but good chance I'll die on the way because a lot of people die on the way.
Yeah. I haven't spent a ton of time thinking about this movie to this question. And I love this. So thanks for this, Anakin. Yeah,
very exciting. My final thought, Ken, is about lightsabers. I feel like they're so vital to the, iconography of the Jedi, to the legend of the Jedi. I do hope that a version of lightsabers is in this movie. I could see a version of this movie where the last shot is the first lightsaber powering up, but I hope they're more involved in that. How do you feel about the lightsaber of it all? Do you feel like that's essential when it's called Dawn of the Jedi?
I would call it essential. I like what you're suggesting, that it there's a bit of a reveal, and you're not suggesting this either, but I don't need it to be like 3 Jedi and a droid in a lab going, by golly, we got it. We figured out how to do this. Unnecessary, but also I don't know. You can find a way to do it, but it's important, right? It's important. So whether we see the first ignition or the first improved ignition of a lightsaber, I'd be on board with it. But I do think they have to factor in, and again, if let's just say someone does emerge from a hut and says, "Look what I built," and what that means to everybody, and what different interpretations of that weapon are, or maybe someone's like, "Oh, it's not a weapon. That's obviously there's great purpose behind that." So it has to factor in for me.
Yeah, I'm excited for the philosophy of the lightsabers, and also seeing if you have to wear a large backpack to power them.
I would love that in a weird way. My high school self, who had to lug around a VCR around to film little sketches, would love it.
I would love that. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with another question and a power of the light side back in a moment. And we are back with one more question from Twitter. This comes to us from Tony Poirier. Tony says, so sometimes you get screeners for new episodes, but when you have to stream them, like the rest of us lowly plebes, when do you choose to press that skip button for recaps, opening credits, etc.? Oh, and not necessarily just for Star Wars either. Thanks. Thank you, Tony. I think you probably know the first thing we're going to say. There's no such thing as Lowly Plebes. We do the podcast. Sometimes we get screeners. Sometimes we do not. And we are very lucky to have them. But no such thing as a Lowly Plebe. I know you're joking, Tony, but I need to make sure that no one thinks that we think that way. Ken, what are your thoughts on skipping stuff?
Yeah. I never do. Never do. All right. You're talking to someone, that Game of Thrones theme plays, you listen to it. All right. You never skip it. I'll tell you what I did. I watched 7 seasons of the Gilmore Girls on Netflix. 7 seasons of 22 episode network television. And they have a long theme. There's a song, there's credits, there's freeze frames, laughing. Oh my, I never skipped it. I just, and I'm not a completionist in a lot of other things in life. I can leave a lot of things on the table. There's just something about it. And I'll say there's also no like high calling for the art of it for me. It's part of the experience. I think that's true. I just enjoy it. And also when I'm settling to rewatch something, I love, if I'm on a treadmill watching Game of Thrones, the credits are playing and I'm, getting into the mindset like, all right, cool. I'm, now up to this speed on the treadmill and I'm going to walk. Or if I'm, last email check, it's like I use those credits. I use them to set it for the show.
This is some great stuff. This is going to turn into Gilmore Girls Center for just a moment because Gilmore Girls is central to my journey. I don't skip credits. I love them. Talk more about that. But I can't. I haven't even heard it in a long time. The song got on my nerves.
Yeah.
Relatively early in our marriage, Sarah and I were sharing things with one another, and she was like, I really like that Gilmore Girls show, but I never finished it. And I was like, I've never seen it. And I got hooked and I loved it. But it's like after the first couple episodes, like that theme song gets on my nerves. So we skipped it. And I learned my lesson because there's a thing in the credits that ended up relating to a future job that my wife had that would have been good to know, but because I was being a grumpy little a-hole, we skipped it. So we did a partial rewatch of Gilmore Girls several years ago now when the continuation came out, and I was like, we're not skipping the credits this time. And then it's like, the credits are great. The song isn't that bad. I was a fool.
Yeah. Look, I'm not going to say you deserved it, but I don't know. Maybe it's what you got.
I deserved it. But that was a rare occurrence. There's something about that song. And like I said, I couldn't hum it for you. I couldn't tell you what it is. I couldn't tell you what I don't like about it. I haven't heard it in years, so I don't remember. But I normally, that was an outlier because I love credits. I think that they are a great resource to guide you into the story, to set the mood. It sometimes makes me like viscerally angry that streaming shows offer the skip button. And if people want to skip them and that's their preference, I'm not mad at the person who chooses to skip them.
Yeah.
But like I've accidentally hit a skip button on Doctor Who. I'm like, no, that is unacceptable to me. And then I go back, and it's not like I'm going to miss something. Right. So Doctor Who, Twin Peaks is very much a slow down, get in the mood. The Wire, Succession, Mad Men, Cheers, Game of Thrones. They're beautiful works of art by themselves, and they really help you. The well-made ones really help you get into the mood. And even Game of Thrones, it shows you where the action's going to be this week and what's essential, right?
It totally does. Yeah, it totally does. It got a little less specific as time went on, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because it travels the maps too. Mm-hmm. I paused that one to be like, oh, I don't have the book with me now. Where are we going? Where are they walking? What's going on? So yeah, I love the credits. Never skip them. Now recaps. Do you feel the same way? Is that your last email check, or do you ever skip recaps? I will admit there have probably been more times where I have skipped a recap to get to things, but at the same time, like if I'm just rewatching something, maybe not. But also,
you place on the timeline, and you need to kind of get reoriented, and that happens. I need that. If it's for us, if we're doing ForceCenter stuff and there is a recap, I need to, okay, here's what they're maybe looking to get to and everything. So I generally don't. And it factors in a little bit to the, I have like a lot of us these days, if I'm going to watch something, I got to make sure, is this a time where I engage with my phone or not? Or am I going to concentrate? So those are last looks for me for sure. I also think, I don't think it's necessary to watch the recaps, but even especially in the stuff we do here on the deep dives on our episode breakdowns, like I do think there's a little art to it. Like they're telling you, they're letting you know not just the beats, but what's at stake and the themes. And I think it is present in there, and it's important to watch.
Yeah, I think there is sometimes the why in there when we check in on a specific line from a character. It's not just information. It's what does this character care about the most, or what are they afraid of? Every once in a while, I'm tempted to start skipping recaps because I do think out of necessity, they tip their hand sometimes.
Yeah.
Like the episode that of Mando season 3 that did finally deal with the Darksaber ownership, putting that in the recaps, reminding you that was an issue between Din and Bo-Katan.
Right.
Made you go, oh, we're dealing with that this week.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And sometimes I would prefer not to know that. So every once in a while, I'm tempted to skip the recaps, but I figure, all in on the experience. This is the way the creators made it. They're fine with me knowing we're gonna deal with the Darksaber this week.
Yeah, there'd be also some fun like Game of Thrones when, like, especially later seasons when they were showing like in the recaps something from season 1, and you were like, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Right. Like, somebody died in season 1. Like, oh, okay. Well, either ice zombie or, Yeah. That's really a particularly fun one for a complex show like Game of Thrones. But that's been happening a little bit in Mando too. We're suddenly like, way back. Okay. All right. The one thing I will skip is I really dislike when a show shows you clips from the show you're about to watch. Like, you don't need to hook me. I'm watching it.
Oh, gosh. I haven't experienced it much. Who are these monsters?
Well, some of it's just oldie time. My wife and I have been watching bits and pieces of the first season of Remington Steele, like I said, and that one starts with like just a flash of like every twist of the plot of like, well, now this person gets murdered, and now Remington gets framed, and now Remington punches this guy. Like, I don't want to know. I'm watching the damn show. Like, so fast forward through those in the Great British Bake Off, and I know there are a bunch of differences in the way they're broadcast, but watching them on Netflix, the same thing of like, if anybody's pie is going to fall apart, they show it in this little pre-roll, and my wife and I fast forward through that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I take back. I totally get what you're saying. The next time ons. Yeah. And I think it's case by case. I think sometimes I'm all in on, say, the Game of Thrones ones, but there was times where I was like, I don't even want to know. Grace and I, when we watch shows, we don't watch a ton of shows together, but when we do, she doesn't really like watching, because you want to carry it, going to next week, open to what's coming your way, not being spoiled anyway. So I totally get you.
Yeah, I mean, they're the next time's at the end, which I very rarely watch. But like Great British Bake Off, that's at the beginning of the show. Like the hosts do a little joke, and then they go, "This week, is whatever it is, Cake Week."
Yeah,
and then they show somebody's cake fail. I'm like, that's why I'm watching the show. Why would you tell me now?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've experienced that with some British gardening shows too. What's going on over there, UK?
So that's what really gets our dander up, being spoiled on British reality television.
This is amazing. This is an amazing section of the show here. We haven't even gotten to Gilmore Girls, Rory, Logan, or Jess. Like, which one is your choice? So deep stuff coming here in ForceCenter.
Yeah, I was just going to throw it out, but I'm not going to set off that bomb. We'll come back to that. We'll come
I'll
back to
just say
that.
this. My answer usually angers Gilmore fans. So Gilmore Girls.
I think we might be in alignment then.
Yep.
All right, we're going to move on from our first episode of Gilmore Girls Center to our Power of the Light Side segment. We've been saying this for several episodes, so I bet people know the drill. This is a segment where we have asked patrons on Patreon to submit something positive about Star Wars as a way to just celebrate and to remind ourselves that as much as there can be snark on social media about Star Wars, that there is great joy and profound impact in Star Wars. If you're a patron and you want to submit one, scroll down the post section. It's quite a ways down now, but you'll see the big picture of Obi-Wan Kenobi smiling at the Skywalker twins. This one comes to us from Will Dixon, and Will is responding to a direct request that we made on the show. Here's what Will has to say. Bright suns, ForceCenter friends. Ken suggested writing in about experiences aboard the Galactic Star Cruiser if we had them. So I feel compelled to do so as a love letter to the soon-to-be-retired Halcyon. I must first begin by saying that I haven't discussed my trip at all online until this week. And Will sent this in the week that all the news broke. Will continues. I feared that the perception would be that I was either trying to justify what may be viewed by many as downright irresponsible spending during the pandemic, or trying to gloat about the fact I was able to go and use my expertise or experience to taunt the less fortunate. The exception to this choice was to provide a light spoiler play-by-play for the ForceCenter Discord group because I wanted anyone who was considering the expense to be informed about what they could expect and to have at least one place where I could geek out about it. Like most folks out there, I saw the price and immediately said, hell no to the idea. I later showed the price to my wife with a "can you believe this" sort of presentation, since she was part of a plan to send our son to Galaxy's Edge with me as his big Christmas present. She then said, "You should do it." I was in shock she would suggest such a thing so quickly. I said, no, it was way too much money, but the hook was already in. And over the next few months, I began to seriously consider it. What she said that stuck with me was, you're paying for the experience of a lifetime. That's clearly what this is meant to be. Fast forward to the redeeming of all my credit card miles, pooling of Christmas and my savings together, and suddenly it was happening. I worried that there was no way it could live up to the hype. I worried that I would constantly be second-guessing my decision, even if we had a good time, with the idea that it may not have been worth it ultimately. Those fears vanished within the first hour we were on board. The whole place is interactive. Your room viewport looks out onto space in motion. Droids are racing around. You can break into the engineering room, slice terminals, coordinate plans with the droid in your room, play Hollow Sabacc, meet people in the sublight lounge, talk to officers and scoundrels and aliens and resistance operatives, eat some of the best food you could ask for, fly the freaking ship, and learn to wield a lightsaber. The staff is mesmerizing in their roles. They know you and what you've been doing. They are engaging and, with what can only be the Force at work, are able to keep 100 different passengers' storylines straight and advance stories through direct interaction in choices. To give a quick example, the Pantoran Captain Keevan sat at our dinner table for a few minutes while she was making the rounds to comfort the guests due to an unexpected first-order occupancy during the Friday evening dinner. So I decided to pull an idea from one of the Halcyon comics that Marvel had run recently. I mentioned the pirate Crimson Jack and whether the Halcyon had ever run into him. She replied wide-eyed and in full character, "Oh yes, I am very aware of Crimson Jack." Then she paused. "You aren't pirates, are you?" It was little things like that mixed with the grand opulence of the Gaia shows, atrium interactions, food, and the overall battle of good and evil, good versus evil aboard the ship. This came to such a head that during the finale, I got choked up again and said to no one in particular, "Do you realize what they've built here?" My son gave a holocron to Rey and still firmly believes himself to be an integral part of canon as a result. None of this even includes our planetary excursion to Batuu, which was made extra special as you were given fast pass access and wear pins that give you special interactions with the park staff. On a purely logistical level, the Halcyon staff was able to get my son and me into Savvy's workshop to build a lightsaber, even though I was unable to get a reservation a few months before. They thought of everything. But the time by the time our voyage was ending, I realized our Uber would be there to pick us up in a tight window, and literally remember thinking as we boarded the transport, how long will it take to get back to Earth? I simply could not fathom that we were just in a decorated hallway and the exit was on the other side of the door. To bring this long-winded essay to a close, I would be remiss if I didn't say how much dark side energy I have to fight when I saw the social media comments at the news of the Star Cruiser's closing. I knew what to expect, of course, but it didn't make it any easier to see how petty people could be over one of the greatest experiences I ever had. Joseph nailed many of the things that were said in the news show, and this is what prompted me to write this in the first place. I did ultimately decide to break my internet silence about having gone, simply by saying that while I understood it was extremely costly, you got what you paid for. It was a colossal achievement and one of the highlights of my life. Thus far, no one has tried to take me to task about going. I also give a word of acknowledgement to others who I could tell had their own experiences there. The way they write about it let me know they were as moved as I was. I have no real conclusion to this, so I suppose I write it off for no other reason than to commemorate the epic achievement Disney was responsible for creating and hope that it will springboard them to something equally moving in the future. May the Force be with you all, and may the Force be with everyone involved in creating the magic aboard the Halcyon. It will not be forgotten in my household. Thanks, Will. That is amazing, and I'm glad you took the time to write it out. I'm glad that you took the time to write it out at length to really get into the heart of the experience of everything from this is really expensive. This really seems like a lot to the actual impact it made, the how and the why. Ken, what are your thoughts?
I really appreciate this, Will, and you know, I want to. I think I even acknowledge I've had my kind of heart changed over with the stuff you said in the news show, Joseph. This stuff from Will of just how to look at this. I think I hadn't paid a lot of attention to the hotel overall. Obviously knew it, but you know, that's what happens in the pop culture news cycle. It costs a lot. Those first commercials looked weird. I don't know. That's how these narratives get formed, right? Like you and I are in a weird spot where we're about to dive into Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And why do people like that movie? Some about a fridge, and that's all that's all right. And again, there's other things to talk about, but that's what kind of happens, right? And these things kind of form over time. And I think this is one of those things where it's currently right now. It is everyone's view is this snarky. Well, of course, it was a lot of money and it was silly and And there's a lot of weird things going on with business, and Disney's at the forefront and has been struggling and making cuts and all those kind of things. So let's be clear, there's bigger conversations, and it is a high price point. But I think you highlighted what they were accomplished, what they tried to accomplish, what they did accomplish, and I think, Will, stories like yours, I totally get why maybe you wouldn't be online. I actually respect that you're not online going, cool, I got to do this. It could be taken the wrong way. But I think the fact that you're aware of that shows where your heart was always at. But I think this is valuable. We'll clip out that story. Someone tag like Matt Martin, who was in charge of this story. like it was, I think they do need to hear that. And I know, Joseph, I think you're familiar with at least one or some of the cast members over there too. And it's like, they pulled it off, right? And maybe history won't remember what we've done here, but they did it. And I think, Will, your stories are important. Yeah.
And I think that it is important for people like Will who've had the experience to share that exactly what Will's wife said of like, yeah, it's really expensive, but it's trying to be the experience of a lifetime. And as Will said, it was worth it. And for people to hear that, I think is good because, yeah, of course it's a bummer that it's not open to everyone. But some of the technology, some of the story approach, that the Halcyon, the Galactic Star Cruiser, I think allowed a lot of really great creative people who, yes, work for a corporation, but are creative people who work in this very specific industry of theme park entertainment that's meant to be immersive. How do we do that where people don't just feel like you've been put on a silly hat on and now you're being rushed through a narrative you have no control over? Like, how do you make it be meaningful? That stuff can move forward, and hopefully some of these ideas will find their way into Galaxy's Edge, or maybe smaller offerings that are a little bit more affordable, but have managed to bottle some of that magic. And people need to hear that this was a triumph creatively, so that we can be excited when they find new ways to implement that magic.
Yeah. Yeah, and have reason to move it forward, right? That this isn't just something that's going to be locked away in a time capsule, and a YouTube channel will do a funny, informative, snarky mini doc on it years from now. That this will be something that can move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And final thought, I'll repeat the thing that one of my friends involved shared the great analogy that somebody made of, like, there are scales to this, and going to Galaxy's Edge is like going to a big football game. It's expensive, but this was like going to the Super Bowl. It was this huge, big, mega event. And I wish everything involved with Star Wars cost 1 penny. It was open to everyone. I wish that was the reality. But if you compare it to other events, nobody would judge. I can't imagine somebody judging someone for having a dream come true by going to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah,
and I think this deserves that same framing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm glad you got to experience that, Will. That is, I'm really happy you shared that story.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Will. And I'm so glad that you and your son had such an amazing experience. That is it. Ken, do you want to let people know where they can find us?
I do. We are the Force Center Podcast, and we are found on Twitter at Force Center Pod. Our Facebook page is Force Center Podcast. We are on Instagram and YouTube as well. Podcast available in a lot of spots. Just search, you'll find us. But you can check iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and more. Merch available at tpublic.com/user/Force Center. And patreon.com/Force Center is where you can support us directly. You can follow me at Ken Napzok, or go to my website, kennapzok.com. I'm close to announcing some fall locations for comedy with Mark Ellis, but you won't really know yet. So go to that website to find out, but I'll let you know as well. Where can they find and follow you, sir?
You can find me on all sorts of different social media. I'm on Blue Sky now. I'm on Twitter, Mastodon, Instagram. You can find me at all those places with the handle at Joseph Scrimshaw at all of them. But for now, for myself, for Ken, for the lightsaber that only works if you're carrying a VCR on your back, this has been Cues of the Force.